Welcome to the second video on how to prepare, plan and write a TOK presentation. In this video we want to really focus on the planning and the writing stage and really trying to get some analysis into your presentation, because this is the most important part really, and the part that you should be spending most of the time on. So we've already talked about the real life situation, extracting it down into a knowledge issue and claims and knowledge questions that come out of the real life situation. They're all down here in the TOK world, and so we really want to focus now on this progressions section, and because, as I said, that will be the bulk of your presentation. It will give you some things to talk about, and then we'll be able to look back at finding other real life situations that can shed light on our first one. So in focusing on this analysis, we're moving from that left to right on the diagram. And we really want to give you some sort of checklist or some sort of framework that you can use. Now, surprise, surprise, the TOK guide has a framework in it, and we'll have a look at that in a minute, and that can help us a great deal in actually getting some analysis and some real sort of TOK thinking into our presentation. And here we can see the maths framework, and I've just clipped this out a little bit. You can see that with all the frameworks, we have scope and applications, we have concept and language, methodology, etc., and links to personal knowledge. Now, I've just highlighted one of the areas here in the maths framework, but if we're analysing a question, then the maths framework provides us with some really good questions as well, some knowledge questions. You know, is there a distinction between truth and certainty in mathematics? Okay, this comes straight out of the TOK guide. Is mathematics independent of culture? There's a lot of questions and answers that you can find with that, and especially with recent news article about clay tablets being found with Pythagoras' theorem 1,000 years before he was working on it. So there's lots of questions that you can answer about independence and culture there. So I've looked in this case at the links to personal knowledge, and maths' ability often taken to be a proxy for intelligence. How often do people think that they're good at maths because they have a fixed mindset, or they think they're not good at maths because they have a fixed mindset? And what are the consequences for individual self-esteem in that? So there's a lot that you can talk about there, and you get that analysis by looking at the guide and looking at some of these questions that are written down for you. A second way that I'd suggest you can try and get some analysis into your work is to try and use the 7-step guide that we've made for you on the Word document. We won't focus on step 1, 2, and 3. You know how to find articles that are controversial. You know how to identify opinions, etc. in there. Although step 3 could be helpful for analysis, but we'll focus here on 4, 5, and 6, which is trying to really identify any other knowledge issues that are applicable. Trying to identify the sources of that knowledge and how that knowledge was constructed, and then to critically reflect on this from the perspective of different parties, if you like. So if you follow through some of these steps, it will help you be really systematic and trying to get that analysis into your TOK presentation. The final little trick that we want to show you about this left to right progression and analysis is that maybe you could just pause this slide while you're watching this video and just think, okay, are there any limitations to this? What assumptions or biases have been occurring here? Is there someone who defines this differently? What implications are there? Is there problems with logic? What philosophers or theories or theorists, have there been people that have said stuff about this in the past? Probably there has been, because there's not many new thoughts around, and probably people and thinkers in the past have been thinking about these things, and we just have to find them, and then we need to quote them, we need to reference them, and we need to say, all right, well, people have been thinking about this for a long time, and this is what they said. And if we can get some different perspectives on this, other questions will arise. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because you don't have to have all the answers in your presentation. Further questions can be hinted to be coming up that could be answered in a different venue. So next we want to just talk about, show you a couple of slides, a poor example and a better example, about how you can plan your essay out using the template and how you can get some TOK vocab and some thinking into your presentation. So this one's about conspiracy, might be about the Da Vinci Code or the death of JFK. Probably not a good example, the death of JFK. Lots of people will have done that in the past, and you'll drive the examiner nuts by repeating stuff that they've already read many, many times. So try to choose something fresh and to show your agile mind. So it's been driven down here to this idea of why do conspiracy theories exist, and then the idea of people believing what's most appealing, different interpretations of the same fact, and now we're actually starting to get more towards some TOK language here, bias affecting conclusions drawn. But you'll notice that it's got not a lot of TOK vocab in here, and so probably it's going to meander a little bit around. It's going to focus on the Da Vinci Code or the death more than anything rather than the TOK world. It's going to focus on the real world, and then it's going to just blunder around a little bit. So let's take a look at a better one on the next slide. Okay, so in this one, the person has had the stimulus of a documentary on the Large Hadron Collider. It's a very complicated machine, and I'm not too sure whether many people in the world actually understand that machine because there's so many scientists working on it in different areas. But this person's had a fair go at this. So they've started to think about how far is science limited in finding out reality, because there's some clear, that we really can't find out everything here. We're experimenting with the Hadron Collider. So then they've really broken that down. Well, what is science, and how do we define science, and how do we define reality, and what methods are they using to construct their knowledge at the Large Hadron Collider? One method is that they put scientists in 2 different towers underneath the ground, and they're not allowed to communicate with each other. So the nature of the scientific method is that each group of those people in the Hadron Collider have to find out some information, and once they've found it out, then they're allowed to collaborate, and then they compare their results. So there's some methods here to the way they construct knowledge. So then this person has got some real thinking going on here. So other things that come out of the scientific method is there, inductive reasoning. So that's the theorist part that we were talking about earlier. What's the role of technology? These are other questions that are coming up. And so then we start to see some real analysis going on, some real grasping and grappling with this topic. You don't have to have all the answers. And then there's looked at a second area here, mathematics or history as well, and then it's thrown up some other examples which are going to show that how far is science limited in finding reality. Then there's some other examples here that are going to shed light back on the initial real life situation and show that the question is somehow typical. So the last thing we'd say about all of this analysis part of the presentation is that you need to take a look at the samples that have been provided for you at school. There's lots of samples that are available on YouTube. People are posting their presentations up there. You can take a look at them. I'd suggest you try to mark these with the criterion so you can really start to nut out and see how this works and keep your expectations in check. And remember, most of all, to really focus on using this slide as your first planning document and type all over this slide in the boxes just like we've shown you in the ones before, so that you can really focus on getting this structure and get into the TOK world here, which is below this waterline. And that will help you to really focus on knowledge rather than the constant real life situation descriptions that make it for an interesting presentation, but it's nothing to do with TOK. So in conclusion, I hope that you've had a little bit of inspiration here about how to get some analysis into your TOK presentation. The next video will look at the PPD form, because it's very, very important that you fill out the TK PPD form correctly and all the way through your planning of your presentation, so that you can do the best for yourself, but also do the best for your classmates.